you haven't told us a thing about why you believe that. Are you going to do that or not?
All right, good to have you here. And trust me, you picked a good one to tune into today. So here's the setup. A caller who goes by the name Biblically phones into a live debate show where Matt and Forrest are hosting, claiming he has two solid intellectual reasons to believe in the biblical God. He is confident, he is prepared, and he comes in ready to make his case. What follows is one of the most fascinating breakdowns of circular reasoning you will ever watch play out in real time. Because every single argument this caller presents gets taken apart before he can even finish presenting it. Do yourself a favor and stay all the way to the end, because the moment this conversation reaches its peak is genuinely something you have to see to believe. Before we get into it, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you are watching from right now. I always love seeing where this community reaches, and it genuinely means a lot every single time someone takes a second to say hello. All right, let's get into it.
Well, I'll give out two quick reasons why our God of the Bible exists. The first is that our God of the Bible is absolute perfection. So to expand on this is that because God is love, he would choose to come down to us in a different form, who we call Jesus, to die for his children as a plan of salvation, to be with him in his new kingdom of everlasting paradise. This comports of John 3:16. The second reason is that physical matter is irreducibly complex. So in other words, matter is made up of parts with height, depth, and width. Therefore, the universe cannot have always existed. It was created by our God of the Bible, as this comports with Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Your responses?
And so I want to make sure I'm clear on this before Forrest jumps in. You have two reasons for believing the biblical God. One is the Bible, and the other one is that you think things in reality are irreducibly complex, correct?
It sounded like the first one wasn't the Bible. It was that God is perfection, and therefore he would do such a loving thing as sending Jesus.
Yeah, so the first reason I laid out, I was appealing to both the Bible and the knowledge of God at the same time, because it states...
How do we have knowledge of the Bible? Sorry, how do we have knowledge of God? Like, how do you know that the Bible is... I'm going to let Forrest deal with this, but I'm confused as to how you know the Bible is accurate at all about a God.
Because in Genesis 1:1, the first sentence of the Bible, it states, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." So even before reading the Bible, we know that an absolute perfect being exists, who is eternal, immaterial, righteous, all-powerful, and so forth.
Okay.
Your response?
Yeah, so I just want to understand, I do want to touch more on what the Bible is here in a minute. That was going to be like the third thing that I asked. But I just want to really hammer into what you said a minute ago at the very beginning. You said that God is perfect, and that you tied that into that he loves us, and therefore he came in a different form called Jesus. Could you please reiterate a little bit of that, just very briefly? As few adjectives as possible, not just to save time.
Yeah, because God loves himself first, what logically follows is that he would love his creation of angels and humans. So because of the fail of first man and woman, God had to come down in a different form. And it states in the Bible, I could get to the exact chapter and verse, that there is no greater love than to die for your friend. So, and because in 1 John, God is love, that should connect the dots that Jesus is God.
Okay, so help me understand here. I don't think that any of that is true. You probably already guessed, right? But assuming that it is, okay? Assuming that this God is a real thing, and that he really does love us very much, and that we are failing, that we've done bad things, that we've sinned or whatever like that. I'll grant those premises and we'll move on from there. Okay. Just for now, we'll go back in a minute. Why is the only way that he can forgive us to send a sacrifice of himself to himself, and to have this human version of himself tortured and then crucified, and then now he's allowed to forgive us, but he doesn't forgive us anymore if we don't also believe in this thing? If you love somebody, you say to die for them is the most perfect. Sure, maybe, but like if I love you and you wrong me, I would just forgive you. I would just say, hey man, I get it, sorry, never mind, and I would just let it go. Why would I go through all these extra steps and make my forgiveness conditional? Like, why is all of that necessary for a God that supposedly loves us?
This caller walks in like he has it all figured out. 2 reasons: clean, confident, and the very first thing out of his mouth is already the problem. He says that because God is love, he came down as Jesus, and that physical matter being irreducibly complex proves the biblical God created the universe. And I need you to stop right there, because both of those things are doing something very specific. They are assuming the conclusion before making the argument. You have to understand what irreducible complexity actually is as a concept. It was an argument popularized in the 1990s by biochemist Michael Bay, who claimed that certain biological systems are too complex to have evolved gradually. The scientific community examined that claim extensively and found it did not hold up. But even if it did hold up, even if matter being complex was a genuine problem for naturalistic explanations, that still would not tell you the answer is specifically the biblical God of Genesis. That gap between something is complex, and therefore the Christian God did it, is not a small gap. That is an enormous leap with nothing connecting the two sides. And then the circular reasoning hits immediately. The caller says that even before reading the Bible, we know a perfect being exists, and his evidence for that is Genesis 1:1. Let that land for a second. He is using the Bible to tell us we don't need the Bible to know God exists. That is not an argument, that is a loop, and Forrest catches it instantly. But here is what I find genuinely fascinating about this exchange. The question Forrest asks about why God's forgiveness requires such a convoluted process, sacrificing himself to himself, making forgiveness conditional on belief. That is one of the most underrated questions in theological debate. Because if you grant every premise the caller is offering, God is real, God loves us, we have sinned, the mechanism of atonement still makes no logical sense for an all-powerful being. If I genuinely love someone and they wrong me, I do not need an elaborate ritual to forgive them. I just forgive them. The fact that forgiveness in this framework requires conditions and a blood sacrifice says something very specific about the nature of that love. And it is worth sitting with that question seriously.
To address one of your points is that there is no such thing as an atheist, because in order for you to understand what the word God means requires a revelation from our God of the Bible. So, for example, for you to understand what eternal
we're going to disagree on that point, but I really want to answer. Like, I want you to
we're not just going to disagree. I'm going to jump in,
Sure.
and I'm going to be a dick. So prepare yourself, because I'm still confused as to why you would quote the Bible and then say, even before reading the Bible, we know that a perfect being exists, when we don't, in fact, know any such thing. And then when you say there's no such thing as an atheist, because we would have to have knowledge of your biblical God, no, we wouldn't. An atheist is someone who isn't convinced that a God exists, and that's true for all gods. And you know, I don't understand how you can say that you have proof that a God exists when you've pointed to nothing, irreducible complexity aside, nothing but the Bible, because your reason for saying that we know that a perfect being exists is because of God. And then you presented what was almost a syllogism, but it was logically flawed, because you said premise one essentially is God loved himself first. You haven't demonstrated that that is true or how you know that it's true. And then you said it logically follows that he would love his creation. That does not logically follow. You actually have to produce a syllogism to demonstrate how that logically follows. You don't just get to assert God loves himself first, and it logically follows that he loves his creation. Because I love myself, but I don't love everything that I've created. And you would need to make a syllogism for that. So when Forrest asked you a question where we're trying to get to the crux of what you believe, you responded with a completely irrelevant non sequitur out of left field, which is there's no such thing as an atheist, while there are literally two people here telling you they are atheists. Are you suggesting that we secretly believe in a God? And if you're suggesting that, how do you know that it's true?
Yeah, so my response to that is, yeah, there's no such thing as an atheist, because in order for you to understand what the word God means, requires you to appeal to the attributes of God.
No.
For example,
explain appeal. Explain appeal
I don't
to
need
the
that.
attributes.
All I need to do is say, what God are you talking about? And you tell me the characteristics of your God, and I will tell you whether or not I believe in it. You're confusing the fact that I'm not convinced that your God exists with some kind of understanding of a God. I'm not convinced that any God exists, including gods I've never heard of or been presented with. And so when you list the characteristics of your God, my response to you is, I do not believe that being exists. Now, am I lying?
Well, I'll address your earlier point.
The moment the caller says there is no such thing as an atheist, that is where everything shifts. Because that claim is not just wrong. It reveals the entire framework the caller is operating from. He is not saying atheists are mistaken. He is saying atheists literally cannot exist because understanding the word God requires a revelation from the biblical God. Think about what that actually means. It means the caller has constructed a worldview where disagreement is philosophically impossible by definition. You cannot argue with someone who has decided in advance that your position cannot logically exist. And this is where Forrest absolutely unloads. He points out the stunning contradiction. The caller just told us that even before reading the Bible, we know a perfect being exists. And now he is quoting the Bible as the source of that knowledge. Those two claims cannot both be true at the same time. Either you need the Bible or you don't. You cannot use both depending on which one helps you in the moment. Here's what people don't realize about that specific move. In formal logic, it has a name. It is called special pleading. It is when someone applies a standard to everyone else, but exempts their own position from that same standard without a justifiable reason. The caller demands that atheists justify their position while his own position gets to float above scrutiny by simply being defined as the prerequisite for all knowledge. That is not philosophy. That is a thought-stopping mechanism dressed up as an argument, and then Matt delivers something that I think is genuinely elegant in its simplicity. He says, all I need is for you to describe your God, and I will tell you whether I believe in it. That is it. No grand framework required. No presuppositions about revelation. Just tell me what you are claiming exists, and I will assess it. The caller responds by doubling down on the no atheist claim, and Matt fires back immediately. I am not convinced that your God exists. Am I lying about that? And the caller has absolutely nowhere to go.
Is that for somebody to say that God exists, they are appealing to the attributes of God, because the word exist is a verb. A verb is a doing word. So if you put in the word exist together with the proper noun God, you have to presuppose our God of the Bible first to be talking about him.
No, you don't. I'm sorry, but you're horribly confused. I could say unicorns exist. I could also say Fergalburgle exists. I can state that, but the having a concept of a God is what I'm doing in response to you. You are claiming there's a God, and you are claiming this God has certain characteristics. And I'm saying, I'm not convinced of that. The only thing that's required is for me to have been presented with the concept. That's it. But being presented with a concept is not the same as being presented with the reality of it. You are confusing the map for the place. That is the fallacy.
I am writing down points, so I'm addressing some of your points. So I'm not ignoring your last point. A unicorn is not absolute perfection.
Yes,
so
they are.
God is in a different...
If I say that they are, does that make them absolute perfection?
And whether or not something is absolute perfection is irrelevant to whether it exists.
You just keep saying that it is, but like you haven't backed it up. But like what I'm really trying to get at is that even if what you're saying is true, it doesn't sound very good, is what I'm trying to drive at.
Yeah, I mean, you can say that God is absolute perfection, but you haven't demonstrated that absolute perfection is a real concept that could be true, let alone a concept that is true, let alone a concept that is in fact a God. You just made just another assertion. I would love it if you would, instead of just talking about what you believe, give an explanation for why. The why is the important part. And so if you believe that God is absolute perfection, how did you reach that conclusion?
Well, I'll expand on my definition of absolute perfection. Is that
we'll go from there.
For an eternal, so absolute perfection entails eternalness, immaterialness, all-powerful, all-knowing, personal, righteous. God.
How do you know this?
So I was just listening.
So all you did, once again. No. I'm really sick of this, which is how you got banned in the first place, and it's why I'm instead of letting Forrest just go with it, I'm already monumentally irritated. I asked you to explain why you believe something, and all you did was spout off more of what you believe. Absolute perfection requires eternalness, immaterialness, all-powerful, all-knowing. You haven't told us a thing about why you believe that. Are you going to do that or not?
Well, that's the nature of reality and mathematics. So we need to start with the number one.
I'm done, Forrest. It's you now.
Don't drop him yet.
It's you. Oh, I'm not dropping it. It's all you. I don't ever want to speak to this person again until somebody like you makes it easier. So go for it.
What happens in this final stretch is one of the clearest illustrations of a specific intellectual failure that goes way beyond this debate. The caller tries to argue that saying God exists requires you to presuppose the biblical God first, because the word exists is a verb, and verbs are doing words. And Matt shuts that down immediately with one of the cleanest analogies I have heard in this kind of exchange. He points out that he could say unicorns exist, or he could make up a completely fictional word and say that exists, and none of that requires presupposing the biblical God. Having a concept of something is not the same as that thing being real. Matt calls it exactly what it is, confusing the map for the place. And here's what makes that line so powerful beyond just this conversation. Throughout human intellectual history, one of the most persistent errors in reasoning has been treating a concept as proof of a reality. The ontological argument for God's existence, first formally presented by Anselm of Canterbury in the 11th century, made essentially the same move. It argued that because we can conceive of a greatest possible being, that being must exist in reality. Philosophers have been pointing out the flaw in that reasoning for nearly 1,000 years. The caller is walking into the same trap without realizing it. And then, the moment that Matt has clearly been holding back finally arrives. He is done. He references the ban. He cuts Forrest off. And he delivers a verdict that is not angry. It is just accurate. He tells the caller directly that every single time he has been asked why he believes something, all he has done is list more things he believes, more attributes, more assertions, eternal, immaterial, all-powerful, all-knowing. None of it comes with a single reason. None of it has any explanatory foundation underneath it. And Matt names that pattern with total precision. The real takeaway here is not just about this caller, it is about the difference between knowing what you believe and knowing why you believe it. Those are two completely different things, and the gap between them becomes impossible to hide the moment someone actually pushes back. This caller came in with confidence and left having demonstrated that his entire position rests on assertions that have never been examined. And that is the moment Matt is done, not out of frustration, but because there is genuinely nothing left to examine. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.